Okay, it is live. Well, give it a few seconds and then I'll give it a few minutes to let people roll in. Hello. You know what I realize is when I watch people's replays, I never address people for the replay. Hi, if you're watching the replay. Thank you for watching this. I hope you're doing well. Leave it a thumbs up. Leave a comment.
I never do that. I always forget.
Yeah, I only think about it when I watch somebody else's and I'm like, oh, I never talk to the people. So hey, how you doing? Appreciate you.
Future people who aren't here yet.
Yes.
People in the future, what's up?
Yes. Comment as you're watching, just like, you know, as if it was a live chat.
You out there in the ether.
Hello, Ray. Hey. Hello.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this book. My favorite nonfiction in the whole world.
I'm ready to hear y'all's thoughts. I did not finish it. I will discuss it. I'm not gonna not finish it ever.
It feels like I'm about to cancel you.
See, Angela, I told you. I was like, Bree isn't. I'm worried,
guys. I told her that we would be a considerate group of people.
I don't think I can do it, Angela. I don't think I can do it.
Hello.
She did read like 75% of it. Her brain's just burned out from all the solid nonfiction she read in November.
Look at you giving her empathy. I'm like,
fair, there's a lot. There's a lot in this book, and when I first read it, there was times where I could see she is wrapping around, so I would have to reread a whole chapter, and I'd be like, oh yeah. So it is like it's pretty thick.
Bye, y'all. I'll let Angela host this. I'm sorry.
I will say, I've read it 3 times. Fully, and then I've skimmed it twice apart from that, so I feel like every time I've read it I've gotten more juicy stuff, so I get it is a lot. This is woo, she's giving a lot. I cried on multiple
appreciate you, Aiden.
So I get that.
Well, and I told a friend who I know will love this book, like, don't pick it up when you feel like you have to rush and finish books, like make sure you have like the time. Because I can tell she's going to love being able to annotate it and like take it in slow. But if she's like in the booktube headspace of got to knock things out, it won't work.
No, it won't.
That's what I was trying to meet the deadline. Oh, good. I know there's a lot of thoughts. Hey, Rena. So yeah, I'll give it till maybe 5 minutes and then. Oh, look, a lot of favorites, though. I was reading through the comments in the Discord, and I saw a lot of good comments. A lot of people, I mean, most people that I've heard about this book really enjoy it. So I just admit, I've read too much this year. My mind shut down.
Yeah.
My eyes said, we's tired. We want to watch TV.
And she did try. We had daily Voxer conversations where I would work on my thesis while she would read a section of Braiding Sweetgrass as like our accountability.
Yes, I'm going to do that when I'm in it started over.
Yeah.
Because I want to give it its full. It doesn't deserve me rushing through it.
It's just so good. It's so good.
I'm ready to hear your sermon today. I'm here as a moderator, but I'm really here just as a parishioner. I'm in the
No. I don't have to give it all. You know, I'm here for the collective.
I'm here for.
We should let them introduce themselves. Everyone's seen me. They don't care about me anymore.
Oh, no. This was beautiful. Yes. Oh, yes. Everyone introduce yourself, including Angela. Wait, I never shout, plug whatever. What do you read? What's your channel? Tell us where to find you.
I'm Angela. I'm from Literature Science Alliance. I only read nonfiction for Jess's book clubs. I typically read fiction. Science fiction, fantasy, speculative is like my bread and butter, but I do read usually one outside of my genre a month, whether it's historical, literary, or something like that to keep things fresh. And currently all I do is knit and watch Bones. That's all I do now. I don't read anymore. I just make sweaters.
I love Bones. I've rewatched that TV show like 10 times.
I just binged season 4 last weekend. So good.
It just really give. It give what it's supposed to have done get every time. That, Charmed, and Buffy. Don't at me.
Those are my 3. I rotate through them.
Yes, me too.
So
Don't add
anyways,
me in the internets now. I'd be like, Buffy, let's do it. Get your mama out of this school. They're trying to kill her.
but that's it. That's me. I just love reading fantasy things because I am a scientist in real life, and I just like to escape and go out. So I guess I read this nonfiction from the perspective of someone who is not close to ecology, but I am close to biomedical sciences. So I have that background, but I don't have any background to the mythology brought up or any of the indigenous culture, although I did grow up in the Midwest, so I loved hearing all of that in the book, because a lot of it was not in Ohio. It was definitely like, I think, Illinois and New York and stuff, but it was cool. So I guess I'll point down to Kim.
I was like, unmute it. Hi, everybody. Lamat talahong ba sengiri not tamo. So hope you all are having a very beautiful day right now. My name is Kim. My channel is Native Lady Bookwire. I am Satoa or Tobacco Clan from the village of Tewa in the Hopi Nation, from the Hopi Nation. So yeah, my channel, I primarily focus on Indigenous authored lit. The genre is far and wide, but I feel like I try to center most of my reads on Indigenous author lit, BIPOC reads, and also I feel like I'm centering a lot of social justice reads right now. And then also I'm a literary fiction addict. I used to be like, oh yeah, fantasy. Only fantasy lives here. Only fantasy is allowed here. But now I'm just like, fantasy what? What fantasy? What is that again? Yeah, so it's I think it's been an interesting reading journey for myself. I think I started BookTube 1 or 2 years ago. I don't even remember. It was during the pandemic though. So that was the only reason I'm here, is because I really didn't have anything to do in my spare free time. And I was just like, you know what? I like to read, and I guess I can pop on BookTube and see if I have the caliber to sustain. But yeah, I just focus on BIPOC and Indigenous authored reads, and yeah, good stuff.
Breezy.
I'm like, how do I follow any of that? Y'all set it up so nicely. I also suck and do not like talking about myself in this regard, like this. I don't like it. My name is Bree. I have a channel called Lockbooktition. I talk about books.
Hosts great readathons, does great interviews with authors,
therapist, has 1 million plants. I mean, 1 million degrees, speaks 15 languages. Bree, come on, give the people the things.
15 languages.
Maybe 10.
Wow.
Heather should be here to help me out with it.
We're not worthy, Bree.
I'm 15 languages. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so I host Black Womenathon, which is Black as fuck. It is in October, and we read horror, mystery, crime, thriller, anything in crime fiction, Black authors only. I think I tend to read more Indigenous and Black authors more than anybody else, if we're going to talk about, like, you know, diversifying our reads. I currently am on Anishinaabe land here in Minnesota, which also share lands with the Dakota people. And I read a lot of Anishinaabe literature, I guess. Fiction. I feel like I keep reading stuff and it's like, oh, Ojibwe, White Earth. And I'm like, oh, my neighbors. Like, I'm reading those things. So that's pretty dope. I don't know what else to say. And that's it.
You're so humble, but thank you all for joining me here. Most of y'all should know who I am, no one important, but just before we get into the discussion of Braiding Sweetgrass, so everyone doesn't, or if you missed it, I didn't finish. I haven't been feeling like reading, and I was like trying to pressure myself. I did get through 75% of it, but I didn't finish. So I just want to put that out there. I will be starting it over in a different time. But so I'm here more as a moderator, you know. And I have thoughts. We have some Angela. I'm like, where are you? Came up with some wonderful like discussion questions, and I know that obviously Bree has read this multiple times. I don't know if Kim, have you read this multiple times? I'm assuming, or at least once. So
Yeah, twice.
got a lot. So we can start just I feel like everyone pretty much knows, but your overall thoughts or rating, I'm assuming it's a 5-star for everyone, but if you want to, you know.
I mean, I'm definitely going to round up to 5 stars on Goodreads, but for me, it's actually a 4.5 because for me, by the end, and I'm sure it would change on like reread and reflection, but the last 2 sections or section and a half, I was starting to feel the burnout and like repetitiveness of some of her themes, which I think is intentional. But like it was just like a slight little like, you know, because when I read nonfiction, it's not enjoyment based. It's based off like how did you portray the themes and stuff, and how did I feel about the execution, and that was like the tiny bit. But like one of the best, actually, besides a memoir, which this is kind of memoir-ish, this is like the best nonfiction that I've read this year. So yeah, it was so interesting because as someone who is in the hard sciences, to listen to the way she was framing certain things while also tying into science was just really cool, but also required a lot of retraining of the brain. And, you know, just like it required a very open brain, which like I came to the work with. It's just, it was really cool. Like it was interesting. And we talked about it, Jess, when I first picked this book up, I'm like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And it was like 2 weeks before November. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put it down for a second because I don't know what's happening. And when I picked it up again, I was finishing a sweater. And then I was like, oh, this is perfect. I love this. So I was like in the right headspace. I'm like, I was just like weaving something together and hearing her tell the story of the first myth that we get in the story. I forget the exact name of it. Sky Woman. When she falls to Earth, and you know, all these creatures come together to give us land.
Sky Woman falling.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, this is so lovely. I love hearing her tell this story and then her childhood stories. And I was instantly then brought in when I had a different headspace because I was really stressed when I first tried to pick this up. And I'm like, I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. So.
Yeah, I think that could have been. I've just been like trying to read too many things, and I'm like, I got to read it. And I definitely think this is one to take your time with. And so I do want to give it its due time. But
yeah. So that's me as like the first time reading. I also, I guess, I only audiobook read this. So I listened to her tell the story because I think the author is the narrator, I believe.
Yes, she is.
So I didn't have the physical text to go along with. I was just listening.
Yeah, for me, I rated this 5 stars, and it's really weird because I always read it during the winter or during more like when seasons are changing, and I gave it 5 stars because it just reminded me like me listening to a story of my elders and how it's very repetitive, it's cyclical, and with Hopi a lot of things are done in 4, so you'll hear it again and again and again, and but at the same time it's like there's a reason why things become repetitive, not to tire you out or to but to simply envelope the story of repetitiveness with importance, with meaning, and to kind of solidify that meaning with story and truth, and but also to I think when it comes to Indigenous storytelling, the repetitiveness is important because of oral tradition. A lot of Indigenous communities didn't write things down, but their art of passing history is through repeating. And even to become a storyteller within Indigenous communities, you have someone there listening to you tell it while saying, oh, you left this out, or you're doing a good job, but you forgot to mention this part. So the repetitiveness is and the cyclical nature of it, of kind of story coming back around, is also reflective in seasons and life ending and life beginning again. So I spoke with some people too, and they were just like, it was just at the end I was burned out. But also there's some stories within Indigenous culture where you are burnt out by the end. You're just like, my legs are asleep. I want to go home now. I'm tired. But at the same time, there's other stories. The that where you're just leaning on the edge of your seat. And so it's kind of like a spectrum, like all things, you know. So I can imagine though, if you're not used to that cyclical nature of storytelling and the repetitiveness of this is important, you know. And I like how she does it because it's gentle. It's she doesn't shy away from honesty, but at the same time, she very much interweaves that, especially with this book, that science, indigenous knowledge, spirituality is in indigenous culture. They can't be separated. They're very much intertwined, and I think that's really important. So
sorry,
okay, I'm gonna be quiet.
The painting that she referenced, someone shared in the Discord, and so this is the painting that she was talking about with Sky Woman. I think that yeah. So someone shared that in the Discord, so I wanted to pull it up because it is beautiful.
No, and I think what you were saying, Kim, that's why I think on reflection and reread, it would probably go back up to 5-star. But in that initial time, it like intentionally, especially because I'm a Western reader and someone who grew up with some things being repetitive, but not to the extent that some of these themes were, and more because there's the deadline for this conversation. It was like, okay, I have to finish these last, 5 hours in this time to get here. But like, I would rather if I'd had like weeks, because then the repetitiveness is nice. Like, well, I haven't picked this up in a while, and now I'm reminded of all these things. So yeah, I don't think I necessarily want her to change that either. Like, that's not why my rating's lower. It's not like I'm not a critique. I don't critique literature and tell people how to write things because I can't write. I'm trying to write a thesis and it's not going well. So yeah. Bree, what do you think?
We know you love it, but just
I do every word. Obsessed.
And you interviewed the author, right?
Huh?
You interviewed the
Yes,
author?
I interviewed her twice. And I almost cried both times. I swear I did. I was like, can we just talk for a second? I wanted to say some of the things, but I won't say my thoughts because Kim, you literally took the words right out of my mouth. So Kim said it in a more beautiful way than I could, talking about how circle things are, and just like I just wanted to point that out in like storytelling, because for me, I listen to a lot of elders. I get a lot of knowledge from them. There's a lot of cultural sharing. And the way that she tells stories is how the elders tell stories to me. So it felt very comfortable and very comforting to me. So I really appreciated that. Another part of me is the person who is a linguist inside of this body was really appreciating all the different words that was in Potawatomi, because I'm not really familiar with Potawatomi pronunciations. So I was just like trying my best to try to like figure out how to say it. So one of my students was actually able to help me with that. And I also force my students to read this with me on a weekly basis, dissecting chapter by chapter by chapter. So shout out to my students who are in the comments for that. But I just really overall love the book. If I can give it 1,000,000 stars, I would. I don't know. I'm just still over here gushing and still just trying to recuperate from the fact that I interviewed her twice. That was wonderful. But at some point I do want to talk about the honorable harvest and some other things.
Okay. Let me just make a note right here so I don't forget. Or I mean, if you want to, we don't have to go in any kind of order. So if you wanted to.
No, I think we can go with the questions. I think it'll it'll pop in.
Okay. So just overall, since it is this considered like essays? So it is structured into 5 parts. How did you feel? Did that work for you, Angela, or Joel? I feel like, I don't know. Bree, I don't know if you have any criticisms or if you any feedback on how it was actually structured, because it was different. I think I was going into it expecting maybe one cohesive story, and maybe that also is a part of it being like indigenous is the different ways of storytelling, but I didn't expect like the different parts So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I am by no standards of any kind an expert on the way individual indigenous communities operate, right? However, based on my experience and the current work that I do is primarily with indigenous folks, I never look at anything linear. Like it's just not gonna work. Like you're just not gonna get the linear. And even when I talk to Black elders, if I think I'm gonna get the beginning, the end, and the middle, listen, they're not telling you the stories like that. You're gonna get it how it came out. And that's
long story short. It's not short.
It's not short. You just gonna get it, and they gonna remind you about another part they forgot next week. And then you're gonna get it again. So for me, the structure didn't bother me at all. I was like, let's do it. I liked when she would add moments about how she would teach indigenous botany to her students, how she would share that knowledge with other indigenous communities, how she would share that knowledge with her children, and the way that she did that. For me, as far as like what I felt worked the best was, I don't know why I'm blinking, but y'all correct me if I'm wrong. There is a part of the book where she talks about like pretty much how our environment and the way that we're treating Mother Earth is just not well. We're just not doing the Lord's work. Mm-hmm. And I say the Lord's work because that's my Christian background, but we're not doing the creator work, I should say. Mm-hmm. And the way that she talked about those two different paths that we have to like come to terms with, I felt like it scared me, excited me, and forced me into action. Like ever since hearing that on my first read, I've been like, oh my God, like plastic, or like, what am I doing? Like trying to be like very cautious and mindful of my kin, which is the earth, is what she even said in the interview. I asked her, like, as a person who have all these plants and they're in my home, like, how do I engage in the honorable harvest? Like, how do I make sure that I am, you know, being respectful and honoring my kin? And I was telling her that I propagate and give stuff away. And she was like, that is an example of an honorable harvest. So it's just thinking about the honorable harvest and thinking about those two paths. I thought that worked really, really well, and really just got me thinking so many things. I also want to point out, and I know I'm on a tangent, but I also want to point out, when I interviewed her, she said that she would like to suggest some like new neo-pronouns. And she said that using the word it to describe, y'all didn't hear that, let it go. Using the word it to describe a living being, our kin, is not okay. She said using it is very destructive. And it doesn't imply like a relationship, right?
Oh,
and
that's funny, like, you said
that. Right. And she was saying, when you say it it's just not good. I don't know how to like harp on that. So her pronouns was, for a single individual, you know, being, you say ki. And if it's like, if I have a group of plants, it would be kin. So now I've been trying to be intentional, be like, oh, I have to water ki, or I have to water my kin. I've been trying to be very intentional in the way that I use language. And she also talked about the importance of language, which I talk about a million times on my channel. So anyway, let me just shut up. I just loved it. I'm going to mute myself.
I love it. I love your love of it.
I think also the splitting of those parts, it's kind of, it's identifying a relationship that we have with braiding sweetgrass, with sweetgrass itself, planting it, the nurturing, the not disconnecting ourselves from it, and not and it having a relationship with us. So we don't have sweetgrass where I'm from because we're a desert, but we do have the Three Sisters. And one of the things that the first thing when a life is born is when that life comes out of the parent, we there's dirt in the room to represent land, like this, our homeland. And as soon as that baby cries or just comes out, we plant that baby in dirt. Like, this is your home. This is we want you to have a long life, but also to have a relationship from this land. And then it kind of goes into, and I've done this 4 times where I'm kind of like placed in this room and it's sealed off. There's no light coming in. And we're put in this room for 21 days with our baby. We breastfeed, and then the baby's dad side feeds us, takes care of us. So, and then it's kind of like this, almost like an emergent story. We're being brought in so that we're brought into this world a good way. And alongside that whole process is corn. And along when that baby comes into the world, they're given a perfect ear of white corn. And we call it the mother. This is your mother. And all the good things that we want for you in this world is placed in this corn. And this corn is going to protect you. It's going to nurture you. It's going to teach you. And it's going to teach you in a way not only where you learn compassion, but also reciprocity. So during that whole 21 days, there's all these things happening. But at the end, the baby receives its name from first the dad, the grandmother, the dad's mom. And it's based on clan. And when you're first brought, that baby and the mom are finally brought out into the world for first light, we tell you to live in a very good way. That becoming Hopi or Tewa is not something you're born with. It's something you earn. And even when you die, you are never Hopi. It's a journey that you're trying to become, to be this person that we want you to live this long life. So hopefully you get closer to becoming human, basically. And a part of that journey is being stewards of this land. And all goes all the way back to that origin story, that when Hopis first came to this world, we chose the shortest, driest, scrawniest corn because we want to suffer and earn that hard life because it builds us inside. But we also know what it takes to live in a world in harmony and not take, but to give back, to protect. So that's why there was this chapter she talks about, does the land love you? And everybody's like, what do you mean, does the land love me? But when farmers are sons, and when they're taught songs, they're taught when they go to that field to plant, to get down on their knees and dig into this earth and ask for permission to dig and plant seeds in this earth. They are also taught to nourish, to use their soft spots in them, to sing to their corn, to protect them. And in the way, when they're learning to plant, they're also learning to become parents. You teach and you protect children, and you do it in this gentle way. You sing to them, you teach them of this world. And when that plant loves you back, it bears sustenance. And that sustenance isn't just food, but it's how we put prayers into the world. It's how we show others we love them with harvest. We give and give, but that that giving doesn't end there. People return that back, and it's not like you're told to. It's not that you're expected to. You do it because you want your community to flourish, to be happy, to have full stomachs. And my son, the other day, he was doing his social studies. He's like, what's a social institution? And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. But and I was telling him that the reason why we pray and we suffer through ceremonies is because we want rain. Rain brings moisture. It waters our fields, because we're dry farmers. We don't water our fields. We rely on rain and the rain that comes down for our crops in our field. We don't add water. We don't give them water. We have to rely on our faith and the prayers and the happiness we put out into the world, and hoping that that rain and those spirits hear it and give us that rain back. So when we pray, we're hoping for good crops, right? Bountiful crops. And then that in turn provides full bellies. And then that in turn provides happy people. And then happy people share and they give and they give. But we also have to remember to give back. Like, oh, this person brought this. Like, there's this never ending cycle in Hopi where you're constantly paying back. And it's not like a mandate. It's not an obligation. It's something you do because it builds you, and you have this reciprocal relationship with hearts, with minds, you know. So I feel like in this book, and it's funny, I split it into all the 5 parts, but it's kind of that same planting corn. And when we die, and I can't talk about the specific things that we do, but when Hopi people die and we go back into the ground, which our feet first touch, right, coming into this world, we go out the same way. We there's certain things that happen when we're born, and we leave the same way. And it's kind of like, it's not, we can't take things with us, but what we leave behind, our children, our love, when we leave behind communities, and we just hope that we teach and hope what we leave behind is there. And I feel that, like in this last chapter, which is burning sweetgrass, that whole chapter, in my opinion, represents healing. Because when we burn sweetgrass, it's protection, it's healing others. That we can't force people to look at this world to say, we're all going to die and we're killing each other. But we have to heal minds in order to get them to understand that we're very much connected to this place that we're hurting. And if we hurt it, it will hurt us back. And it's not like because the land hates us. It's just because in order for it to survive, it also could protect itself too. And it does it in all these myriad of ways. But we also have to understand that when we, as peoples, when we heal, whatever ways we do it, we also are healing Earth and each other and all of these social things that are affecting us. So, okay, I'm gonna stop.
For everyone in the comments who hasn't read the book, these tangent things are basically what it's like to read it, and it's like the best thing. But it's also like why it's the nonlinear nature I felt I had never been more trained for by my fantasy and sci-fi reading, I guess. Like if someone normally reads just like normal like historical fiction or like linear stories or linear nonfiction and read this, I could feel them being so jarred. But I loved all of the time jumps and being like, oh, your kids already went to college, but now we're back to them making the maple syrup with you. Like I loved all of the jumpingness of that. And what you guys are both mentioning at the end, the themes of how she's trying to reach people about climate change, because we've all done the standards of like, I mean, look at the weather this week and all the tornadoes we've had in December in different parts of the United States. Like that's unheard of. And like, we're all like numb to it. And I like how at the end of this book, she does try to be like, we do have 2 paths. Maybe we're already on one. We don't know. Here are some things people are doing that might feel small, but they still have hope. Like I liked the combination of we do need to do things. There are things being done. It's not all doom and gloom, because I feel like when you go too negative, it really makes people be like, well, then there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to step back and do nothing.
That's often how I feel.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, as you know, both of you guys were talking about your amazing relationships with Indigenous culture and these wonderful stories that I cannot, I approach this very much as like a Western reader. And I was thinking, you know, a lot of times I bet some people get burnt out like I did because we're used to instant gratification, just even based off our culture and things like that. We're used to going to the store, buying the thing we need, getting it right now. And even in a lot of these stories, you know, you don't get the message right away. She doesn't even frame it like you normally do in a nonfiction, right? Where like the beginning's like, here's what I'm going to tell you. And now I'm going to give you all of this proof or whatever, and then remind you of it. It's not told in that structure. And we're not used to it. So then we're like waiting for like, well, why am I listening to you talk instead of just listening to someone talk and then just trusting that it will get there. And I think it's just really interesting, and I really appreciate how she committed to her roots in telling a story and portraying things, because she's a scientist. She's obviously had to publish papers the traditional way, where you have to do intro, background, results, discussion. Like, she's had to do that. And someone was bringing up in the comments stuff about the science. I was never angrier reading this than when I was reading about all the scientists she had to deal with, because as a woman in science, I just get very frustrated by old men who think this is how we do it, how we will always do it, and la-ti-da. But also, all those men do the same thing, but when they do it, it's like inspirational. Like the man who looked at the stolen data for DNA structure was like, well, DNA has to be pretty. It's the ground of the, it's our code in the universe. It has to make sense. Biology is beautiful. He thought all of these things, and that's how he took the structure, like, from the stolen data and made it. But no one makes fun of him for doing it. Their published paper had no research, was 1 page. They get a Nobel Prize. But this woman, goes to school. It's just like, I want to be a botanist because I want to understand the beauty in the world, and that's not science. Like, it just...
Yeah.
It's
just like, too relatable.
Or when it's proven that, the things people have been doing for hundreds of years successfully actually work. And when we actually study that, it makes sense.
Why?
Because when they were all just
she said in the text, she said, indigenous folks, we are natural scientists. Like, this is not like something new. This is like what we are. And I was like, I'm here for you, girlfriend.
Say that.
I'm here for you, girlfriend.
With it being brought up earlier, and some people mentioned it in the chat, I just thought, I did get to that part, so I thought that was interesting with the changing our mind around using it. And so I typed out, like, you think if we changed our language, we could change how we treat them, but more, do you think it's possible? Like, and do you think changing the language is enough to, I don't know. I think changing the language can be helpful, but do you think that would make a large impact? I don't know.
I think it's really important, because even for people who are good intentioned, like, when you see something as it, you automatically are creating distance between you and that thing. It is a lesser thing when it's an it. Like, you don't think of taking care of it. Whereas, you would never call your pet an it. Like, and we don't put, like, pets on the same level as humans in terms of our consciousness grouping in Western society or whatever. But I think referring to something as more than an it is really important, because then you are forced, at least for a moment, to be like, this is a living thing. I have to at least reach this barrier every time I think about this object. And I think it's one of those more like slow, no instant gratification changes. Like, it would take time, and it's retraining brains and things like that. That's my thing. As someone who, like, never used to think about plants that way, I'm like, yeah, these are really important. And it's also like my sci-fi reading where I'm like, so many times the fungal systems are so important.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so many times.
Yeah. I personally think language is very important. That's one of the, I don't know how to say it. I don't even know why I'm nervous talking about this book. There's something about it that's just blocking me right now. But I just feel like language is so important, and adding language is also equally important. So, how do I trying to make this make sense? And if it makes sense, it does. If it doesn't, let's just go to the next question and let's not even worry about it. But I remember when this, I think it was a school from Rosebud Reservation came to talk with my students and the staff that I'm a part of. And I'm telling him about all these different things that are programmings that we have for students. And he comes up to me and he says, I really appreciate what you do for our students and blah, blah, blah. I've never met this man a day in my life. And he hands me sweetgrass. And I'm like trying not to cry. Like I'm just like, oh my God, he gives me the sweetgrass. So I'm like trying not to like get emotional about it. And then it's like, if I didn't have the language from reading this book and talking to other elders, I don't think I would have understand like that gift, what that gift meant to me, and what he was actually doing by offering me sweetgrass. And then a part of me in that moment was like, oh my God, maybe I should give you money for giving me this sweetgrass. But then, as Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer says, things from the earth shouldn't cost you things. So that's also something that I like try to figure out. It's like, dang, if that's the case, I should go in the grocery store and get what I want. In a little bit.
From
but
the earth.
Right. These tomatoes came from the creator. Listen. So it's just like, it's a lot of things. I don't know. It's just the language behind it. I feel like language help you make sense of the world, and it helps you understand a deeper connection to things that you may have not understand. I'm going to show y'all this. So this is a sweetgrass that I braided myself. And I was lucky enough to have the teachings and actually braided it from the ground and put my tobacco down and things like that for this. And there's just so many stories wrapped up in this specific sweetgrass that I can like really see in real time and also understand as much as I can by reading this book based on the language that was given to me. And that is a tangent from it, but I was just trying to get a more meta way of explaining how important I think language is.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
It did. I understand.
And I feel like what Bree, to kind of jump off what Bree was saying, is that languages, and I think that's why language revitalization and sustaining language is so important, because we get into the minds of different peoples and what they find valuable and important, but also the diversity of mindsets and how that is something that we can cherish and learn from. And what's to say that animal and plant kingdoms don't have their own story to tell and their own languages themselves? And we may not be able to think that we can communicate, but even just by observing and watching them in nature itself, we can learn how they communicate with one another, and more importantly, like how that we fit in this world. And I think my my daughters are so pessimistic and sarcastic, and they say that, well, if we just wipe ourselves off the earth, if humanity just one day just poof, we're not here, like our environment will thrive. And so we have to start behaving in that way where this environment doesn't need us. And I'm like, um and I was like, well, we can think that way, and but also there's there's I'm sure in the beginning we've had a reciprocal relationship where we do need each other. And I think right now it's just gone so far to the point where we feel we can't return, where we can't see that, where we can't live that. But it's also kind of, how do we maintain this balance of giving back while giving to others? And I feel this kind of feeds into how we've siloed ourselves, how we silo life. Like we put plants and animals in these groups, and we don't really concentrate on how we're building that relationship, or how we're the fact that when we ingest something, it came from somewhere, like we don't go outside and put a bunch of sand in our mouth and eat that. There's the things that we ingest and that we bring into us all have had a life before. So it's really interesting to, when we talk about language and we talk about othering, it's very scary to call a very thing that nourishes us it, and then because we've even had in our history where humanity, we've called each other it. We've put each other in these hierarchies and said that, and that also objectifies and oh, I don't know what happened.
Can you hear me? Okay. but that language also we kind of come into this realm of objectification. So if we can objectify a people, then we can objectify plants and animals, what is our relationship going to be like with that? And I feel like the environment is such a huge that we've even kind of siloed what is important rather than connecting things. Environment is very much connected to violence against Indigenous women and people and persons of color. Environment is very much connected to the political structures that we have. Environment is very much connected to poverty and the health of those who have very low income. So it's kind of like we've siloed our thinking and not really even connected these things that are hurting us, and also that the things that we are hurting, right? So it's like we've put things into these groups, and I think that Kimmer is very much trying to establish relationship, to establish connections, to establish that indigenous spirituality, knowledge, science, and culture. These things cannot be separated, just like how politics cannot be separated from whatever. Even though we try to think that way, we all know that's not how things work, especially within colonial USA. So I think that's another thing that I saw in terms of themes of happening within this book, hence the repetitiveness and the cyclical nature of the story.
Yeah.
I love that. I didn't think of that part with the language, because you make an excellent point about just how we did refer to groups of people as it and less than. And I guess it's just from a lack of, from myself, a lack of reading a lot of white Western and even Black Western stories that aren't, more from Indigenous or Native peoples, that in addition to just like my mindset and stress level right now, I think going into this expecting a nonfiction more similar to other ones that I have read was definitely like, I was like, no, this isn't how, in my mind, I'm like, no, this isn't how it's supposed to work. But like listening to this, like, makes sense. And she speaks about nature and like the earth, but it obviously expands to more things than just, plants and things around us. But when you talked about bringing up like culture and religion, well, spirituality, I had, what was it like, reading of nonfiction that has a blend of religion and culture and science, because I haven't thus far in my reading really read one that kind of blended these things together. Because I think there was a point, one of her students were like, is this like your religion? Or there was like a mention, someone was like, is this like your religion or something? She was like, well, but yeah. Or I don't know if you wanted to speak on this, or Angela, did you have something else before that?
Well, yeah, before that, when they were talking, Kim, you were talking about like, not really rationalizing the origins of things. That reminded me of her honorable harvest experiment in the mall in the story. And I'd been thinking about that a lot, because something that happened to me while listening to the beginning of this book is I was working with wool for the first time in knitting, which before that I've always worked with the cheapest yarn, which is usually made of plastic. It's like acrylic. And I was working with wool, and you're supposed to make it wet. You're supposed to do all these steps, and I'm trying to do it. And I'm like, why won't this take water? Why won't this get wet? And I'm like, oh, wait, it was on a sheep, and sheep need a way to protect themselves from the water outside. And that's why fishermen wear wool. I was thinking of like all these connections. And then the story was talking about origins. And I'm like, we really never think about where things come from or how they're made, even as well-intentioned as a lot of us are. Like, we don't connect it. And like, even she tried with the ink, but like, how do you find the origin of something so disconnected? Mm-hmm. Like, at least with yarn, I can be like, okay, this came from this type of animal in this country. I don't really know how this animal was raised, but at least it's only 1 degree away from something that was once living. But ink, even as someone who knows chemistry, I don't even know what components make up black ink. Like I have no clue. Kind of no knowledge.
I don't know
what part of the earth that came from.
Even stuff that's like because there's some things like this may seem not related, but I've tried to be more intentional with like buying clothing of like higher qualities and stuff. But my mind doesn't take it a step further to think like I'm just like, oh, I know I like these fabrics or these things are better, but I don't ever take it a step to think back even, you know, further to like where those things came from. I mean, besides cotton, because I feel like cotton's always in the mind, obviously. But yeah, we are very disconnected because you know, click online and you can buy something or just walk into a store. But did you want to go into Honorable Harvest since you
I feel like Honorable Harvest is one of the highlights of it, or she spends a good third of the story and then she repeats back to it a lot. Like I think a joy for me while reading that, while working with this, you know, natural fiber for the first time, was not only like learning the origins of it subconsciously, but also being like, there was a purpose behind this material. Like when they went to that Walmart outside, right, whatever they called it, and it's like these materials were made for a purpose, and it was like the land was wanting them to. It was just so cool when they were making, what was it called, the structure that they made on this like outdoor week-long trip. I can't remember the phrase, but that whole section was really cool. And every time she took students into the field, I was like, you are a fantastic teacher and you are not paid enough, because I know this took a lot of emotional and physical energy, and a lot of people, I mean, she even said one university questioned funding one of the field trips, you know.
Yeah, I have to deal with a lot with that in my job, like explaining why we should partake in cultural programmings. And I just be like, huh. I wanted to go back. Sorry, I just really want to go back to 2 points. The first one was like the origin of things. So I blame a lot on me, you know, being American and growing up in this Western side of things, that I often didn't think about the origins of anything until I lived in Ukraine. And Ukrainians, they just have very indigenous ways of operating. Like my first big wake up call is when we had like a community picnic, and I showed up with strawberries in November, and I felt like they were ready to hang me. Like they were like, where did you get those strawberries? You get strawberries in winter? Who was the farmer? Where did they come from? What water source did they use? Like they were on my ass like gravy on rice. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to do this. Another time is when I bought a chicken, and they were like, who killed that chicken? What farm did it come from? Did you know the person? Did you have a conversation with the person that you got that chicken from? So like every since then, I used to be like, listen, I went to Olha. Olha talked to me. We had tea, we had cookies, and then she killed it, and then she gave it to me, and I showed up. You know, I had to be more intentional of knowing where things came from. I couldn't just be showing up with things and not, you know, explaining the relationship that I had with things, and then the people who provided those gifts for me. Also, going back to what Kim was talking about of relationships, I was in conversation with an elder who's passed on now due to COVID-19, and he was talking about like similar to Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, of like relationship, and how indigenous communities are relationship first or relational first in most things. And he was talking about the medicine wheel, and he was like, we need to do things together. If we're going to, you know, help our earth and be kind to our earth and engage in the honorable harvest, we need to do things together. He was like, we need white people, we need red people, we need yellow people, we need black people. We cannot do this alone. And to think that, he was like, the medicine wheel is one. It's just a circle. It's just keep going and going, and we can't do things alone. So, you know, that got me.
Yeah. I think America, sadly, and maybe it's just a Western thing in general, not just America's very individualistic. It's very much, I mean, the whole American, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I think we've gotten so far into I'm looking out for myself and you look out for yourself that I
It's
think from what I've
Wendigo
read of this,
thinking. It's
we
Wendigo
definitely
thinking.
Yeah.
Is what
The
it
Wendigo
is.
chapters, yeah. And like
Is Wendigo thinking is what it is.
and it's never going to, we're never going to solve or be on the path back towards, a better, like restoring the earth if we're like that. But I just, not the wheel.
Sorry, I couldn't help laughing when I read that. Sorry.
Get out. And so that's where me and my pessimist brain are like, how can we even when this is like, large parts of society are like this. So, but I had something marked with the honorable harvest, like when because she was talking about instead of taking things, it's like dang it, I can't.
I remember there was one part where she went to go get the leeks, I think, and it wasn't ready to be harvested, so she had to like leave and come back.
She's like, like taking things instead of giving, or like taking what it's giving us, and how basically, take how we always take more, or take things that aren't supposed to. Like she was talking about coal and all. So I was like, well, very.
Oh, and I looked it up. Ink has like oil and petroleum and stuff in it.
Of course. Yeah, I never would like what is ink made of? Like I never think of that. But
yeah, and I think also when we're talking about what it would take to slow down or conserve, it requires communal and across the board sacrifice. But when we put individual want and need, or even like what Bree was saying with the Wendigo, hunger ahead of communal survivorship, then it has this whole different understanding of what are we prioritizing. So when we get this mindset from the very beginning, especially when she was talking about the Pledge of Allegiance, right? She was talking about how early on with Western culture, we infiltrate or even not infiltrate, we root things in the education system where we think of self, the highest grade, the Pledge of Allegiance, justice for all. I'm like, not really, but
we have competitive communities. We don't have like communal communities.
Competitive communities, and we
Speak
have
on that.
Who's this rat race and who's trying to get to the front first. But when it comes to communal relationship building and communal thriving, we have to think of the last person. Because when we're thinking about community, we have to think of the person who is last and how do we push them up to the front. So when we think about social justice, it would just people with humanity. We think of the Black, Indigenous, trans, disabled person, right? That the intersectionality of things. So when we think of those things, and how does that connect to all of these ills that we are experiencing as a community? So when and tying those things to environment, tying those things to what we consider valuable within our society, and we get caught up in this whole narrative of self, of me, of not us, right? Because I feel like that's even like the first thing we all we learn is we learn we learn me, we learn you, which is another thing, which is like other, right? You, it, they. But we don't really learn we first. We don't learn us. We don't learn, or not practically speaking, I think we try to embed those things in kindness and generosity, courtesy, wisdom, but then we were like, oh, but those things are maybe elective type learning. So it's kind of interesting that within our westernized system, we think of individual first. We think of not how, but with I think even just with POC cultures, BIPOC cultures, we think about how am I related to you? How do I relate to you? Who? I mean, the first thing when you meet someone, right? When you go to a new house and you're all from the same community, who's your mom?
Right.
Who's your grandparent? Do I know this person? So
Yeah.
it's kind of, that's the first thing we hear, right? And but with some cultures, it's like where those things don't, those things sometimes may not take priority in a world where the self is put before the communal. And I want to say this isn't the same thing as a collective like thinking or collective like government, because the community and communal thought also values the individual, also values what the individual can give to the future, to the past, to where we're at right now. I think collective sometimes just puts collective first. Like, we don't care about you individual. Like, you got to get on this this ship, and we'll leave you behind, you know. But with community, we think of individual, and more importantly, the last individual. That's why I think with Hopi culture, we always put women and children first. Our identity lies with the matrilineal, because I think many cultures try to put the importance on the vulnerable, because if we protect the vulnerable, then we're protecting so much more. Everything layers out from there, you know? So when we protect rock, place, plant, the bee, those things, those types of things, the vulnerable, but that is very much connected to our own well-being, then we start to think a little bit differently, and not just self, not just feeding the hunger of the Wendigo, you know, like that bottomless hunger that we have.
I think it's interesting you said that, because I can't remember what it was. So what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? That astronomer.
There we go. The struggle for me saying that, huh? He has a podcast, and he invited this woman on who is in a lot of circles that has to do with climate change. And he asked her, he said, a lot of people are trying to figure out like what we can do on the individual level. Like, how can we help be more climate change conscious on the individual level? And she was like, well, she pretty much was like, there's nothing you can do. Corporations have to do things. So it reminded me of what you were saying earlier, Jess, of being like, I don't know what to do. Like, is there anything to do? And I was just thinking, well, that's not from like the communities I'm in. I'm just talking about myself in this part. Like, the indigenous communities I am would beg to differ. Like, there's nothing you as an individual could do. So I was just like, that doesn't make quite sense to me. And I understand that, you know, big companies can like use less plastic, blah, 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 and all these other different policies they can have. But I'm just feeling like there needs to be like change with everyone, not just us waiting for these corporations to change and then we change.
I agree. I just don't know how we get there, because we are so separate and individual. And I mean, you know, there's lots of caveats, and of course there's nuance to the conversation, right? But I don't know.
I mean, we're going to lose coffee beans soon. So I'm sure once we get there, corporations are going to figure something out.
We're going to lose water soon. Because people fail to realize that water is life.
That's going to be the next wars, not over oil. It's going to be over water. Well,
no, seriously, the U.S. It's by itself is having less and less access to like fresh water.
Yeah, I mean,
like water don't replenish fast, so it's
Nestle
anyway
buying up all.
Well, yeah, I mean, my mom and we grew up in Ohio for a couple generations, probably 1800s is about when we moved into Ohio, and we live near Lake Erie. And my mom, her whole life has wanted to move somewhere warm. And then she's like, I want to move to Arizona. I want to build a house. Here's my dream house. And I'm like, Mom, you live near fresh water. Why are you purposely going to a place that is already struggling with water? That does not make sense to my brain. And luckily I convinced her. I'm like, also climate change. You wait long enough. Ohio's the next Florida. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I don't understand as someone who's grown up around a lot of water leaving water.
I read Dry and it terrified me, but
No.
so I just don't know, especially someone mentioned it up here earlier. You could see the individuality with like in reference to how this country has handled the pandemic. So with something that's like present and happening right now, I don't know how you convince more people to think long term, because they're like, well, it's not happening right now. It's fine, even though it is. But like, they're like, I still have water today. I still can go to Walmart and buy my vegetables today. So
that's
I think,
just, man, that
I
thinking.
It's scary. And I think when we have kind of this, like, I can't do anything, it's because it's fear. We are kind of like paralyzing ourselves with this. We can't do anything. It's already too late. No one else is going to change. And it's kind of like that fear that is keeping us from moving forward, because we don't want to think about it. I mean, I have my own kids telling me they're not going to have kids because possibly the next generation won't even be able to like drink water. And by the way, my daughter read Dry and she was just like, Mom, this book is like the scariest book I've ever read. And I think that's why I have a whole appreciation for sci-fi dystopian apocalyptic reads, because especially with Octavia Butler, I just recently finished Parable of the Sower, and but that at the same time, to see hope embedded throughout that whole book with her with the seed keeper, or not is it seed keepers?
They had something with the lake too that was kind of hopeful, how they were working towards cleaning this one body of water.
Yeah, and I think it's I think one of the things that I've keep going to is kind of creating definitely a multi-generational response to what is happening. I think our youth has they're so stressed out about what's happening because they're basically inheriting all of our faults and all of our screw ups, and now they are kind of coming into this mindset of, this is what we're basically inheriting, you guys's shitty failures, and we have to come up with ways to respond to what is happening in our community. So I feel like that's such a natural response to feel like, how do we even move on from here? What is the first step? And because it and it's just fear, like I think about those things. I think about how, and my only response to it at this moment is just to keep passing on the knowledge I have, the heirloom seeds that we have, sharing those heirloom seeds with multiple families, teaching them the ways of sustenance and how we can live on, and also the stories, the language, because even when the poop hits the fan, and the government collapses and all these things, we're still going to need that knowledge of how we can still survive in this world. And even with I know, like, even some people within my own community know where certain springs are and certain where water is underneath the ground, and how far they need to dig down to have access to water in the middle of a desert. So it's kind of and I think we sometimes just become paralyzed by our fear, and it's heavy. It's heavy, and it's burdensome, and it's kind of like, oh well, I only have like, I'm close, like me myself, I'm close to 40. Oh, I have only 40 more years left, so maybe I'll just enjoy the rest of my time or whatever. And I think some people kind of just feel that hopelessness. But then there's other people, like what Angela was saying, is they don't see a hopelessness. They see a chance and a potential for us to change and to grow and to come together. When Bree was talking about the medicine wheel, that we're all needed in this work, that we can't leave anyone out. all the way until the last person to the person in the front, that we need each other more than ever. And it's just like, how do we create a sense of connectedness? And like water is life, but we say that, but we're all also connected by having that water within each and every one of us. We're all connected by water ourselves. We all have that in our bodies and our minds. And even when we breathe out, water's coming out. When we ingest it, like, so it's kind of like that is the thing that connects us all to that element.
And I think something that, this is definitely part of Western thinking versus this story, and I think why this story, like nonfiction, you know, has hope in it, is it's not about instant gratification. What you're doing for a month is not going to show you physical results in a month if you choose to join a cause and try and fix a part of land. Like, how many months did she spend, or years, on the pond in her backyard to try and reverse what was naturally happening to that pond and things like that? So, and like, we do have examples in the United States of times where when we did choose to be like, oh, we need to reverse some of the harm we've done it. Like, I used to grow up near a river that everyone still reminds me caught on fire twice. It is now very clean. You know, like we do have programs that have worked, and it's just taken time. And I think if you think, well, what I'm doing now, if I choose to join a cause, or if I choose to financially support a thing because I don't have the mental energy to like do things, but I want to support a conservation, or if I want to try and maybe support this politician who I think has my ideals, it might not do anything in 5 years, but it could in like 20. You know, like it's worth planting the seeds for the long haul. And I think sometimes because we want to see results now, like when I'm stressed, I like to clean and I like seeing the dust go away, but that's just not something we can do with climate change, right? And I think honestly, having conversations like this, reading books like this, it is a step in the right direction. I mean, forces people to think, to engage, to not ignore it completely. I don't know.
Can I offer a reading?
Yeah, read.
I just think it sums up what we just said. It's page 35 if anyone cared. Some folks argue that we need to do nothing at all, that the unholy coupling of greed and growth and carbon will make the world hot enough to melt the Wendigo heart once and for all. Climate change will unequivocally defeat economies that are based on constant taking without giving in return. But before the Wendigo dies, it will take so much that we love along with it. We can wait for climate change to turn the world and the Wendigo into a puddle of red tinged melt water, or we can strap on our snowshoes and track him down. Yeah. Let's track his ass down, because we can't be out here in these streets.
And someone brought up someone brought up a good point that, like, yes, at the federal level, things generally feel stagnant all the time, and that's by the stupid Constitution's design. But at the local level, you have so much more power at the local level, but it takes more effort, and it takes more community and community support, which, you know, we're all tired. It's all exhausting. And like, I don't do a whole lot either, as I'm sure a lot of people in the chat don't, but like, if you ever do feel hopeless, looking towards your local community is probably a better place to start if you want to see tangible things. I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of hopeless, I'll give you another read because I'm obsessed with the reading. Gratitude for all the earth has given us leads us courage to turn and face the Wendigo that stalks us, to refuse to participate in an economy that destroys the beloved earth to line the pockets of the greedy, to demand an economy that is aligned with life, not stacked against it. So, I mean, what you were saying, hope, let's do it, local level. Anyway, I'll stop reading because I have so much stuff highlighted, and I'm like, yes, Robin, read us for filth. But not
this is like the type of book that would be great to do one of those like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants book things where like one person annotates it, then ships it to someone else. You know, like,
yes,
and just seeing all the
get everyone's thoughts.
Fun thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I should do that.
I'm just saying, like, this book is so good because it doesn't look away from the hard issues. but I didn't come away from it feeling sad. I came away from it feeling more energized and thoughtful
and ready to go.
Like, I mean, I'm not right now. I mean, I'm working on a thesis. I don't have the energy to do a whole lot, but it's like, I'm also not hiding in a hole, which like 2020 has put me in a hole. Like, I just like hide from a lot of things. I just do my absolute best, which isn't always a lot, but
yeah.
So,
did you, I don't know if you already, oh, well, Bree popped away for a second. I didn't know, did you start or did you want to expand on the honorable harvest part? I did have
I feel like we've talked about it a lot too, but.
Okay. But I just, one part that she was talking about was.
What page are you on?
184. I'm on 184. I'm sure you got a tab there. But talking about how it's not an enforced policy, but it's an agreement, obviously, among the consumer and provider. And says, if you follow these rules, we will continue to give our lives so that you may live. And so I was thinking, she was like, what if we had to abide by that answer? And earlier when Kim, when you were talking about, you know, our relation to the land, and it's going to be, I just think about all the issues now and in the future because we don't give back or we don't appreciate the land like we expect it to give us things and the way we treat it. And I mean, and everything is done for money. It's not done just to feed people, or we have so much excess that gets thrown out and thrown away because it's not, you know, perfect or up to standards. And
all the ugly fruit that we never see.
Yes. Or I saw something on Twitter, and this guy basically, he has this group, I forgot where it was, but they go to these stores, like they've learned their schedules from people helping them out. When they put out stuff that is still fine, but it's sell by date, it's like, and they get hundreds of eggs, milk, all these things that we just throw out because it's like, well, we're not going to make any money, so we're not going to sell it. This is kind of off topic, but I just had that in my head, so I just wanted.
No, there are actually places in communities that have it. So I'm fortunate enough to have a community. It's called the Benton Dent, where I live, and listen, a regular. You understand me? I be up in there. I'm gonna buy it all. Like, I'm gonna need these eggs. I'm gonna need that broccoli. I'm gonna need all of that. Ukrainians will come at me because they would be like, where it came from, but Ukrainians aren't here right now, are they?
I'm
just kidding.
Well, and we talked about earlier how we have a very competitive mindset in the Western United States. And I'm just like, it is so true. And I'm like, but there are board games, there are video games. There's so many other ways you can show you're better without like we brought up briefly, like the education system, which is a big part of this book because, you know, we do have whole theses that almost didn't happen because people were like, but we already know burning things is bad and stuff like that. And it's just like, as someone who thrives in a competitive environment, like I'm a competitive individual, I despise it. Like I want to go into teaching. Like that's what I'm hoping my next thing is after this PhD. And like, I hate that the idea is you have to make a test that you have to grade it on a curve.
Oh,
so in theory, most of the people are supposed to only sort of understand what you've taught. And I'm like, how is this the goal? How is this what we're doing? And
I just feel like there's other ways to show intellect.
There's so many ways.
Than
and like
the standard system that we have.
Even the idea of the dumb jock makes me so angry. Like, I'm sorry, can you play basketball? Or do you have the ability to take in all of the information and reflectively respond to your environment and tell your muscles what to do? Because that is a different level of intelligence that not everybody has.
Speak your truth. Speak your truth.
And like, it's just, yeah.
I also wonder, like, I always so also on page 184, she talks about like advice she got from Hey baby. Hey cutie. So she talks about how like even though we are like descendants of Nana Buju, that like we also have an issue with self-constraint. And I'm like, same. So it's like reminding yourself to just take what you need. And I know this is like really off the analogy I'm about to make is off, but I constantly think about when the pandemic first started and everybody was like, toilet paper, losing their over like, toilet paper. You know, I had to say shh because the kid is here. So losing the toilet paper, and I'm just like, y'all really ain't taking what you need. It's like, how many pieces of toilet paper do you need to get that backside? Hoarding that resources. Is just not honorable
and then
at
when
all.
There's whole countries and cultures who don't even use toilet paper, like you are not going to die if you suddenly have to learn how to like use a bidet or something. Like you'll be okay.
I've also used a cup in water. Amen. Like rinse that ass. I mean that place, the derriere. Is the baby still around? The backside. Auntie Bree didn't mean it.
Well, that's also like, this is kind of a tangent, but even in our food, because we're not taking food from quality sources, right? We have a lot of processed food that are literally meant to make us eat more of it and eat more than we should, which has led to our obesity problem. Like, because everything in capitalism is like, well, we want you to consume as much as you're able to, and then a little more.
By just like overfishing, we overdo everything, and then it's like there's not enough. I don't know.
I mean, I just feel like it would really be beneficial for, I would say, Americans to see how other communities are doing it, because as a person who lived in Ukraine for almost 3 years, I am disgusted with how much crap we have in the US. Like, we have so much stuff. Like, you go in Ukraine, the pasta, the cereal, and the rice is in one aisle on one side of it, and then the other side you got different things. Not me going to Walmart and it's just one aisle both sides for cereal. That is a lot. I mean, that's just me. I get it. People want Captain Crunch and a little bit of Frosted Flakes or whatever, but I just feel like it's so much. Like, we have our portion size are huge. I feel like none of that is really necessary. Like, it just feels like so much. It feels like so much. Like,
I was lucky enough to like live in a house where my mom's only advice was always moderation, like with foods and with everything. And like, luckily I wasn't one of those kids who went to college and like had never been allowed to like eat whatever I want or whatever. Like, I'd already done that at home, but like a lot of my friends didn't. So they went to college, overdrank, overdid whatever. And they didn't understand like moderation. I thought it was one of those things where I thought moderation was a common thing people were taught in the home, and it wasn't. And I was really confused, because that's like the only, like, that's everything you ever do. Like, nutritionists can't agree on anything, but they can't agree that too much of anything is really bad for you. But
I know. I remember going to a place and I was like, what do you mean I can't take it to go? I want the laptop.
Now, what do you mean? And it's like, I just saw this thing that I just highlighted. Hold on. So it's like, the honorable harvest does not ask us to photosynthesize. It does not say don't take, but offers inspiration and a model of what should we take. And I'm just like, and that's on period.
Yeah.
It's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, but I feel like we really operate on the, every time we find out we can do something, we do it. And it's like,
it's,
you know, when you see those headlines that are like some weird thing or a robot, it's like, just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you should do that. Please. Some things just, we shouldn't cross the line.
I feel like that chapter where she discusses self-restraint, or why is it that we have this mentality of needing to be full, like not even full and content, but over full, where we're bursting at the seams. Where, I mean, Thanksgiving is like a perfect example where people are like, I'm gonna wear my stretchy pants at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And but
not the stretchy pants.
Yeah. But we also kind of live in this world where we need more than we have. And why is that? Why do we feel the need to fill this hole, this hunger, this that we, or even spotlight of what we don't have, you know? And again, I think that just kind of comes back to that Western colonial mindset of we have to have and have and have and have, and and even when we have everything that we have, we do this thing like that competitive thing where we look at someone else and we see that they have more than we have, and we still want more, you know? So it's really interesting. Rather than saying, wow, I have all of this, I don't need it, I can give it to someone who needs it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that I talk to my kids when we go somewhere to eat, like, you only take what you are going to eat, and then after you're done, you don't really need seconds. Like, we don't need to take food with us, you know? We have food at home, and but whereas when I invite people over, I'm sending them home with food. Like, here, take this. And so it's kind of like like identifying what who needs what, and then also what you can give. And there's this thing that my grandma always says, like, it's good that when you have people who have good jobs and they have so much more to give. And I think one of the things that our language that we learn first, other than mom and like milk or whatever, is thank you. And that when someone brings something over and it's just they only have so much to give, you never shame them and say, this is all you brought, you know? Instead, what you do is you thank them. You thank them for giving as little as they have. But what my grandma is very, 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 very famous for is shaming those who don't bring anything but have the most to give. So, even, like, shaming is very much a part of our in our culture, but it's done through humor. It's just like yeah. So it's really interesting to, but yet we are thankful for those people who have nothing to give, hardly anything to give, and yet they still bring something, you know? So it's kind of like, where do we put more emphasis within our cultures of, like, being thankful, that gratitude, you know? So I think she really points that out in one of the books, where she says, having a culture or a thankfulness for gratitude and reciprocity, you know? So I think sometimes we shame, instead of the people who have more to give and don't bring anything, instead we shame the people who have nothing to give and bring very little. And yet we're like, oh, that's their fault, their circumstances, they should have did this and this. And I'm like, not really. So it's, I mean, as we all know, like, if you're a person of color, already born into this Western world, just because of our skin color, we're already born at a disadvantage, you know? So it's kind of like, oh, I guess it's my fault that I was born this color, and I have this whole society of people who aren't supportive of me because of the way I look, you know? So it's really interesting to have that conversation too with my kids, and them not understanding why is it that they didn't get picked for a science experiment that emphasizes indigenous culture and science compared to another person who is white, basically, and did this grand idea of whatever. So I was like, I don't, yeah, it's really interesting.
That's tough. Well, I know we're going to start winding down because Bree, we don't want to hold her too long. So I just had two final questions that I wanted to ask. And so what were the most impactful sections or part of this book for you?
So there was a lot, but something that honestly really stuck out to me that I thought is something that was, it was a one line that she just had in the book, and it just like, it flew by, but I also like have held on to it the longest, that we're all indigenous somewhere. And when she was trying to find ways of being like, I'm talking about all these indigenous things, and I'm not saying you appropriate these cultures, especially when you're trying to have ceremony with the land, but I want us to all feel like we're in this, you know, we're all in this together. And just remembering that we all have this relationship with land. We all were from cultures, from a place that we once were indigenous. And like, as someone who's just like super mixed and super just like parents of like two immigrants, one from the 1600s and one from the 1980s from different continents, I'm just like, I don't know where I belong usually, and I don't think about it, but I thought that was a very inclusive thing that she chose to do. And I think it really, like I said, it was just like one line, and like I held on to it. So I don't know if that means it'll be the most impactful, because I do think the honorary harvest and things like that we've talked about so much is probably going to stay with me a bit more. But that was just like a very personal thing that I noticed when I was reading it.
Yeah, I did like that part too, because I mean, I'm just from South Carolina. I can't trace my family back that far, so I often feel like, obviously I'm a Black American and we have our own traditions and things, that similarities in growing up, but sometimes I'm like, well, I don't have a heritage, I don't have a culture somewhere outside of this. So that part was, I remember that line and being like, yeah, I don't know that I feel like, I'm just like, yeah, I'm from South Carolina, but that doesn't feel, I don't feel like I'm indigenous to there, like I don't feel like a native person in the way that I think of an indigenous culture or person, if that makes sense. So
I definitely agree with that. I feel, and this is, I don't even know why I'm bringing it up now, but it's not something I say publicly. But I do remember reading that part as well, Angela, and thinking like, there's so much work for me to do, because currently right now I am my family's historian, and I've been going through documents upon documents and talking to everybody about everything for the better part of close to 15 years, just trying to like figure out where we come from. And I was just like, wow. And like, it's not that I'm not acknowledging that I'm Black and also Choctaw. It's that I was never taught those ways of knowing. So like, when reading that, I was like, I need to figure out a way to wrestle with that. Does that make sense? Like, come to terms with that part of myself that I don't often come to terms with, because I grew up very much Black on Black on Black. Yeah. So it's like, and it's also something that I don't think my family ever talks about or want to even engage in. So like those things, it's like, when I read that, I kind of felt like a little slap in a good way, or like a little nudge, like get your ish together kind of thing.
Yeah, I remind me on a separate thing to message you about that, because my mom has been trying to push me to be that and our family is huge. And I'm like, and before, like my grandmother is still alive. And there's just a lot of broken pieces where it's not easy to connect. So anyway,
yeah, I actually do trainings on it for Black Americans of enslaved ancestry.
You got a link? I'll pay, girl.
I did a link. I did a training yesterday. It was like 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've
just been doing so much work, and I've been like crying.
You need a nap.
What?
You need vacation from all of your. You need rest. But after you rest, then you gonna holler at me. Okay.
I will give you all the tips I have, like no charge. Don't worry about that. Like I will give it all to you, because I feel like gatekeeping that is like doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. But I didn't know people wanted to know that until like 2 years ago. I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And like other Black Americans of enslaved ancestry was like, you do this? What? Yeah. Like share that. But I didn't know it was something.
If I could learn that and then pass it on, I'm sure there's so many of us who need that. But I was watching Hiii on the Hog, and because, being from South Carolina, there is a lot there. Because, that's where a lot of the ships came in, were into South Carolina. So that was, if you haven't watched that on Netflix, it's really good. I want to read the book too, but anyway,
I'm gonna write that down.
The most impactful section, or is it the whole book?
It is right. I think I just like how she started her story with just Sky Woman falling of, and then I think she brings this up multiple times within the book, but our origins and especially with Muskrat. How he sacrificed his life so Sky Woman would have a place, and he gave his life to ensure that she lived, And it's really interesting because he wasn't like this very powerful animal. He wasn't known to be the best swimmer. He was just almost like the last resort, basically, to help her and provide a life on Turtle Island. And so his sacrifice is something that really stayed with me. And she points this out earlier in the book, that our lands, our animals, our just have been sacrificing themselves so that we can be here. So whether if that's plant life or it's their spirit, even just things going extinct, and they're all giving themselves up so that we can take and take and take. So I feel it's like, I think it's about time for us to give back to that. And I think at the end of the story, a way she points out is the burning of the sweetgrass. That whole entire section is how we can do that, is by healing one another, by healing our mindsets and what it is that healing Wendigo within us, you know? I mean, I definitely have a lot of work to do. I think this year with 2022, one of the things that I said was like, if I don't need to buy a book, if it's on Scribd or I get it from Libro, then I think I'll be okay, you know? Like, and unless it's, I was like, am I gonna reread this? Am I gonna, is it, and I feel like, and I'm not here to shame anyone. That's just something I wanted to pick up this year is like, is just how am I going to give back in some small way, and what small way is that, you know? And then just how am I going to be always mindful in this way of what am I giving back to this world, other than just me existing here and taking from it. What am I giving back to the people that I'm connected with? And I think people always crack up at me. Like I was telling Jess, I was like, hey, whoever didn't read the book, that I have a book to give away if y'all in the chat or whatever. But I think also by kind of developing a relationship, especially in the book community, is something that I cherish all the time. And I something that I'm thankful for every day, because I could just very well not be here. I could just be wherever, you know. But I think that's just one thing that is just reaching in within myself and just saying, what am I sacrificing so that I can give back to a world, a land, the animals, our four-legged, two-legged, winged out relatives that have given me so much. How can I give back to them, you know? And so I feel like that was kind of seeded throughout the book. But I think Sky Woman, I've never heard that story before. I think this was probably one of the first times I've heard it, which is interesting because I've been to Akwesasne Mohawk community and I've heard the Thanksgiving address. So I was like, oh, wow, this was cool. But the Sky Woman story, I haven't heard that. And I was just like rereading it. And then I started researching it. So I think that was, anytime I get like a story or something from another community, is something that I really cherish. And then to see her interweave that throughout the entire book was something that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. So much in here. Well, I can't wait to reread it at a different time. But I guess for the last one, because I was talking to Angela about this, that I think that, I know you would probably say everyone to read it, but I don't know if everyone would receive it. So do you have, who would you recommend this book for? Like, do you have a certain time in someone's life, or do you think just everyone should read it blanket? I don't know if everyone would be able to take from it the message that she's trying to give.
I got so many thoughts. Kim, you look like you had it, but I got so many, because I've seen some stuff online and I was ready to choose violence. So
I guess here's my I'm not as connected to it pitch, I guess. You know, like, I mean, I love it, but I don't, I've only read it once recently. I think this is definitely good for people who do want to help the land. Like, they are receptive, that we're not talking people on like the extremes or anything. Like, they are looking for hope. They are looking for a way to interact with the land again, because they've, you know, I've grown up in suburbs and cities my whole life, so I'm definitely someone who appreciated her look of nature. So someone who wants that or is already involved with it, like some of the people I've recommended this to are my friends who are already in conservation. I would be hesitant to give this to a lot of my friends who believe in climate change but who are hard scientists, unless like I knew that they were open-minded. I mean, I think they need to hear it and they need the messages, but I can feel them rolling their eyes, and it's very disrespectful, but like I just feel it, because trying to get someone who's like always been taught their whole life to objectify things in their science and take away the humanity and the life and the spark of things that they're studying, getting them to rework that, I feel like I would need like a primer before this, or else they're just not going to appreciate what this is trying to say. Because as we've said, she really is being like, this is how I want to tell it. I'm going to be true to the storytelling roots of my culture. And I think that doesn't need to be changed. I think the person who's reading it needs to be changed before they get to it, maybe. I don't know. I think the book's really great. I just know that there are people in my life who, if I gave it to them, they would DNF it after like 2 chapters, or be like, what is Angela, like, what is she doing now? Like, I thought she did biophysics. Who is she? Like, I don't know. So, and it's like, it's rough because like, I think the messages in it are universal and need to be given to people. But I also know how communication works and where a lot of my fellow Americans are. And like, I mean, a lot of people also are just like so unhopeful. Like, they are so jaded and just like don't even know how to look for this. Jess, I'm not calling you out, Jess. I know.
No, I'm just saying, like, I think that, you know, the message, because a lot of things maybe the message, but the way it's conveyed sometimes, you know, and that's a way of like, you read a book at this time, you didn't like it, you come back to a different time. So I think it is, you know, for certain people, you may go into it and you're like, this is what is, you know, because it is different. So that's why
I'm really glad the publisher believed in this so much that it became so well marketed and so popular. Because for years, this has always been on a nonfiction table of a bookstore that I have gone to.
Yeah.
And like, this is not a book that a traditional like person who edits and publish works would be like, oh yeah, this is the next, I don't know, like Cast we read last time is a very accessible, traditional call to action nonfiction sort of thing. Like, that is easy to be like, yeah, get this in people's hands. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, publish this. This is not that book. Like, I don't think so. I'm really happy it's had that push. Because, I mean, when was it published? Like 4 or 5 years ago? It's not a new book. I don't know. Like, it's been out for a while. My cousin told me to read it.
Over 20 years. Over 20 years.
Yeah, and it's still always on bestseller tables. It's always being pushed. And I think that's really important. But I do think people don't know that it's such a really cool blend of philosophy, sociology, memoir, religion, science. And that's so cool. But I think that's also makes it really hard for it to be like, this book is for everyone. I don't know.
Son of a gun.
You didn't know it was 20 years old?
Well, this says 2013, but I don't know if that's just this edition.
I'll go to Storygraph. Storygraph usually always has the first day.
But I thought it was, for some reason, I thought it was more recent than that, even so.
No, I knew it was old because, like I told you, Jess, my cousin's been trying to get me to read this book for years. Like years. I mean,
like, what are years? 3 years? But yeah.
5 years before I knew BookTube was a thing. Years, like a long time.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're a person who thinks very in a linear fashion, and you feel like you need to see yourself in every book, everything that you read, and you is honest with yourself that maybe you're not as open-minded as you want to be, or you're just, I don't think this book is for everyone, because I've read reviews of people who of a certain kind read this book and trash it. So I do think that there's a level of your mindset has to be a certain way in order going into this book, or willing to stretch in ways before going into this book. I don't know what else to say. I would just say that.
You at least need to go into it with respect. Because it was another thing Jess and I talked about. It's like, for a long time, my siblings non-binary, when they first came out, it's like, I didn't know what these words meant. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew to be respectful. And then I slowly started to learn what that meant and the importance of it. And I feel like a lot of the culture and teachings here, and even the non-linearness and the cyclicalness, and just, it shouldn't be groundbreaking, the idea of community and taking care of each other. Like, that shouldn't be, but it really kind of is in the year 2021. Like, and people are just so weird when you're like, it's really important not to call a plant it. There are so many people who are like, how is this the bone you're picking with the world? This is not that important. It's a plant, right? They're just going to hand wave it away. Like, you need to come to this work with respect. Even if you don't understand it, even if you are like, I can't relate to that, you have to know that this isn't something that's supposed to affirm your beliefs. It's supposed to try and provide knowledge for you in a different way.
And challenge you, or challenge your beliefs.
And understanding that there are different types of way. There are different traditions.
Yeah.
Like, there's not one traditional path. There are different traditions, and honoring that. Kim, because you was about to say something a couple times.
Yeah, take us out.
Yeah, I think kind of like what Bree was saying. Throughout this whole entire read, she speaks of reciprocity, and her book and her ways of thinking is sometimes may not be what we're ready for, because there has to be, or for me, I felt a certain vulnerability going into this book. Even highlighting that the consumerism within my life, and identifying ways of, sometimes there's times where I do look away. I do, because it's painful. I mean, even within my own Indigenous community, we have been taken advantage of, and especially when it comes to coal mining, our water and our resources, and how that has affected our dry farming, and all, even when it comes to violence against our community. So it's like, there's a part of me that was growing and expanding and absorbing, but that was my kind of like my agreement and reciprocal relationship going into this book, of coming into it with a sense of respect, but also a willingness to learn and to absorb a different way of thinking. And for me, it was quite easy because I did grow up with that cyclical storytelling, and the repetitiveness, and also how I've grown up in a life way where we can't separate sovereignty from land, from culture, from religion, from politics, and all those different things within my life. And it's because of that I'm able to look at my fellow person and find connections of how I am able to be connected with them, but able to also see how they connect with me. We're also very like, how do I connect with you? But more of, how do you connect with me? And how is this relationship going to, how are we going to build one another? Or even to the extent, how are we going to hurt each other? You know? So it is going into this book. I've even had some of my own native readers go into it, and they're just like, I'm not ready for this. It's hurtful to read this, and I'm only one person. What can I do? You know? And I've heard other people, even a teacher who's like, I'm buying this book for my entire class, and we're going to read it from front to end, you know? And I think it's just, I don't think it's I mean, you do have to kind of go into it with a sense of respect, but also, how am I gonna, accepting what this book is going to give me and what I'm going to give this read, you know, how I'm going to engage with it. So I do, like, even amongst Native readers and Native peoples, they've not wanting to read this book and engage with it just yet. So I don't think it's just overall people. I think sometimes even Native readers that I've run into weren't ready for it. And because there is a sense of, whoa, this person is calling me out. And I was like, I think that's the point. That's the whole point.
Yes.
Is just, yeah. So it's, and then even with it kind of gives us a sense of where even within the science world, or even I can make the same argument about those who are in law. They try to separate themselves from the decision that they're making and only engage in law, but or only engage in the science, you know. But you can't. How do we separate? It's impossible to separate ourselves when we ourselves are living, growing, human, breathing things, you know. And that sometimes people of us, we define ourselves by how we relate to one another or how we don't. So it's kind of impossible to say like that this way of thinking is not for me. But what does that say about myself? What does that say about how I see the world? And I because I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes reads are just really difficult for me to envelope in and absorb myself in. And a lot of it just really comes back to is what does this say about me, you know? And but I think it's like Bree said, I think you kind of have to go into it almost flexible. You're engaging in a whole new type of thinking, even if you haven't even engaged in any kind of Native lit. So I would recommend maybe engaging in Native literature or even just BIPOC reads in general, and then kind of go into this, because there's so many BIPOC reads this year that I've read that do storytelling in that cyclical kind of way. And I think those are the kind of the reads that I've been loving throughout the year.
Yes. I think that when I read whatever time next year that I get back into this, that could have a whole nother discussion, because there's so many different things in here, and I feel like I'll need to talk about it with people. But any final thoughts or any words you want to share with the people? I feel like this has been a really good discussion. It looks like a lot of people who read it got a lot from it, and I definitely even got something from this discussion, even not finishing it, and knowing that it's okay to be called out. And hopefully I try every year. I'm like, I'm going to try on my pessimistic outlook. And I'm hoping 2022 is that year.
It doesn't help that you have like a whole video series where you have to look at the negative stuff all the time. So you can give yourself some break. You know?
Yeah.
But you're doing your job of like collecting all of the tea for people so they can be aware and make decisions. That's a draining thing.
It is, but then look at this little face. He gets
yeah, he's adorable.
Yeah. But yeah. So any final thoughts or anything you want to share?
Well, thanks Bree and Kim for all of your insight, because your stories were like 10 out of 10. Like,
really, Kim.
I enjoyed listening. It was like getting like bonus content of the book. I was just
yeah, just thank you for like sharing this space with all of you, and you guys are all amazing and awesomeness. And hi Nigel, you're awesome.
Hi. I'm just like, I don't know what videos are.
I just want food and hugs.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, everyone's in the description. Everyone's channel is linked there. So if you're not subscribed to them, you should be. I don't know what you're doing, but thank you all for joining us. And I hope if you haven't read it, that you do, that this did encourage you to pick it up at some time, but now maybe you have an awareness of the structure of it, and you can go into it with a better mindset. So thanks everyone. Thank you if you're watching the replay. Look, I remembered. But Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are. Toodles.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, wait, not bye. Just kidding.
Oh.
I forgot the read for January is Mediocre by
I am
Aaliyah.
ready. I've already read it. I took 1,000 notes.
Yes.
I'm ready to read some people from Phil. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Not really, but
Yes. Okay. So
It
let me
was
go ahead.
interesting.
We might have to have a
Okay.
2-part panel discussion with like a bunch of people. I feel like we're gonna have a lot of thoughts on this one.
I will be in the chat. It ain't that deep.
Yes.
I started that read. I actually started it just this month. Yeah. So I can't wait to be a person cheering and clapping in the chat.
Kim, there's a section based on how much I know you that you're gonna be upset about.
Oh, okay.
Just prepare for that.
Yes.
I'll be reading with the mouth guard on.
Not upset at the author, but the content of what it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean,
sure.
I recently I'm reading How to Be an Anti-Racist right now.
Oh yeah, Ibram X. Kendi.
Yeah, really enjoying it. I think I'm gonna follow up. I might just read half and half nonfic and fiction for December. And I am so behind on my content. I filmed like all this vlog stuff and then but I kind of had a recent tragedy with my husband's family, so it's kind of like I'm trying to catch up. But
Be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't owe nobody on the internet. You don't owe nobody on the internet.
Yeah, don't take too much energy from yourself. Same principle as with the land. Only take what you need.
Yeah.
Look
at that. Look at you.
Throw it all
I
out
love
there.
that.
So I'm just the shriveled teapot.
The next one, here's the next one. If you can see, it's Mediocre.
She'll also make an announcement video. So
yeah, the dangerous legacy of white male America. It's a good. I've already read it, but I'm going to reread it, get a physical copy. So that's gonna be something. But I'll have an announcement video. I'll post it on different things. But thanks again, everyone. See you later. Toodles. Bye.